So it seems some major reforms are coming to the ways in which grievances put forward by Canadian air passengers are evaluated, processed, and ultimately resolved.
Canadians deserve an air passenger protection system that is clear, comprehensive, and enforceable.
Canada's Transport Minister highlighting a slew of measures aimed at protecting travelers originally outlined in this week's spring economic update. Among them, outsourcing the resolution process for complaints to a neutral third party, also mandating the delivery of compensation to passengers within 30 days, and quadrupling the maximum fine for airlines that systematically violate the Air Passenger Bill of Rights. The changes look good on paper, but do they go far enough? That is what our next guest is here to answer. Let's bring in Gábor Lukács. He's the president and the founder of Air Passenger Rights. He joins us now from Halifax to discuss. Gábor, we appreciate this. Welcome to the program.
Great to be with you.
So first glance, you heard what the Transport Minister had to say and some of the items that they are proposing. What are your thoughts?
I welcome the Minister's admission that the Liberal government has botched the APPR since 2017. We have been cautioning the government a number of times, made witness submissions, oral submissions, that this is not going to work. And so the admission to that effect is warmly welcome. Unfortunately, we have not heard much specifics. Even the claim about so-called quadrupling the fines is somewhat of a fiction, because last time some similar attempt was made in 2023, it was the government that actually sabotaged the measure. Parliament ordered the government to implement various measures, such as cost recovery fee, and also Parliament increased the maximum permissible fine to $250,000, but then the government failed to actually increase the maximum allowable fine in the regulation in the APPR themselves, so it just remained something that looked good on paper, looked good for PR, but was not implemented in practice.
Yeah,
I'm also concerned about the lack of commitment to close the biggest loophole, which is the required for safety reasons loophole. That's what airlines use in most cases to refuse to pay passengers compensation. And in Europe, which has the gold standard of passenger protection, it has been well understood that when a plane breaks down, it is the airline's responsibility to fix it, and it's the airline's responsibility to compensate passengers who are inconvenienced as a result. That's how European Union has been working for the past 20 years.
You look at the number of complaints, and according to the government, they are doing this in large part to address the backlog of complaints. There are a lot of questions here, not to mention the fact that they wanted this to go to a neutral third party, but the fact that there are close to 100,000 complaints that are in the backlog. What are your thoughts on that? Is this even going to do anything to address this, or enough at least?
The reason for the backlog is the botched APPR. It is a failure by design. When you have a system that it takes approximately one full working day for an employee to decide the fate of $400, that system is unworkable. And that is happening because of these loopholes, like the required for safety reasons loophole, which don't exist in Europe. Whether you do it by a private third party or do it by the government is not going to fix the structural problem. It's not going to close the loopholes. It's not going to change how long it will take to deal with a single complaint if you need to pour through hundreds or thousands of pages of evidence to just decide what you do with $400. I would also add that when they say impartial, I'm always very skeptical about it, because a private third party, private company, which is presumably selected by the government or perhaps by the airlines, will have a financial interest to do at the bidding of whoever selected them. And we have seen that the government in the past, in the very recent past, has been acting as a mouthpiece for airlines, has been serving the airlines' private interests. So I'm very skeptical about that. The best solution, in my view, would be to harmonize Canada's passenger protection regime with the European Union's gold standard insofar as eligibility conditions are concerned, which is very simple, straightforward, and then let the Canadian small claims courts and the Canadian common sense prevail. It will be 5-minute hearings if the rules are simple.
When you talk about your skepticism, do you think this is just about politics in terms of, or at least as opposed to a real conscious and let's say altruistic need or effort to change this? Or and given the fact that you mentioned the 2023 announcement, What do you think about the timing of this?
I'm wondering about the timing. I'm wondering perhaps if it is a way to deflect attention from other social issues or problems that are happening. But of course, 100,000 complaint backlog is a serious problem that needs to be addressed in some way. It's just that I don't believe that this approach, by focusing on a third party as opposed to dealing with the cause of the complaint, the cause of the backlog, which is a botched APPR, is going to be getting us where we want to be. I'm also concerned by lack of specifics and that it feels a lot like a publicity stunt, like a PR exercise, like the one that we have seen in 2019, like the one we have seen in 2022-23. They all made these bombastic announcements, but in reality, when you look at what the ministers and Transport Canada internally are discussing, they're actually very much pro-airline, very much telling everyone, don't take those public announcements seriously. We are not changing the policy.
Okay.
So I would like to hear how the policy is going to change, how the loopholes are going to be closed, and why do you need to have another consultation after a consultation in 2023, a consultation in 2024-25, where everybody already put forward their positions?
That's a very important point. Connected to this, shifting gears slightly, but the announcement, or at least the possibility that they're discussing the privatization of airports, and you wonder if this would have an effect, for better or for worse, on the number of complaints that come forward. What are your thoughts on the issue as a whole?
I'm, again, very skeptical about the timing and about the context. With privatizations, often the only party that gains is the party who ends up buying the public property. If the airports can be run well in a profitable manner, I would like to hear a logical, coherent explanation as to why we are not doing it then on our own. What is it that a private company owning and running the airport can add, which public ownership would not resolve?
Okay, we appreciate your time and your insight on this. It's a big conversation. I know there's a lot more questions to be answered. Gábor Lukács, we appreciate this. That is the president and founder of Air Passenger Rights, joining us from Halifax. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me.